Now, before we start this episode of Biz Audio, I'd like to give a big thank you to Mike Byrne for taking time out of his day to chat all things radio and Biz Audio, and I'd like to wish him the best of luck in his brand new role as the Super Radio Network's Group Content Director, and I'd like to wish him safe travels as he departs on a holiday. And look, it was a really, really good interview. Got some great insights into content directing. It's the second content director I've interviewed after Mark Hine. Of course, actually, it would have been third, actually. Peter Samios last week, and a few weeks ago we had Mark Hine. So it was a really good interview. I did enjoy it, and a big thanks to Mike. So without further ado, here's an amazing interview with one of the country's most respected and accomplished content directors, Mike Byrne. Welcome back to Biz Audio, and today we're joined by one of Australia's most accomplished and respected content directors, Mike Byrne. Mike has worked on some of the country's biggest programs, including serving as head of content for Jonesy and Amanda and WSFM, helping drive the station to #1 in Sydney and Survey 7 in 2024. Prior to his time at ARN, Mike was the group content director for SCA's KOFM and NXFM. Over the years, Mike has cemented his reputation as one of the industry's standout content directors and producers, and it's my pleasure to welcome Mike to the podcast.
Wow, what an introduction, Max. Now I have to try and live up to that.
Welcome to Biz Audio, Mike. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be on, Max.
Now, first of all, congratulations on the new role, and what excites you the most about joining the Super Radio Network?
That's a really good question, and excites me is exactly right. I had 12 months outside of radio for the first time in 30 plus years, and I was lured back into it, I think, by the excitement and I guess the opportunity to make a real difference to a network that I think has so much opportunity available to it. So that's probably the answer to your question. I think just so much opportunity, bunch of great people, a really great network that's in the heartland of regional Australia, and you know, there's so many upsides available there for listeners, clients, and the staff.
And stepping into a new network, what are some of your first priorities? Now, I know you've only been there for a week, but have you sort of gotten to know a few people yet?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's been a listening tour this last week, and I'm there for a week and then go away for a couple of weeks on a long planned overseas holiday. So really, I've only had the opportunity to get my feet under the desk and get in front of a few of the locals in the Newcastle market so far. But certainly on my return, the intention is to get to all of our markets. We have markets right across New South Wales into southeast Queensland, far north Queensland, far western New South Wales, and even in the Northern Territory. So there will be a bit of travel on the cards, just getting to meet the people that make the network tick.
Awesome. And speaking a bit more to your time as a content director, I know you've been a content director at ARN, SCA. What role do you think digital strategy plays now in content direction?
Oh, for somebody like me, an old timer like me, it's been a massive learning curve. And I think digital content really is just another channel in which we, are able to produce content. So whether that's specifically social media stuff, or whether it's our own digital channels, podcasting, or streaming of, our linear services, really, I think it just opens up the opportunity for audio to be heard in more places and in places where people want to hear it and how they want to hear it.
And what do you think separates a good content director from a great one?
I wouldn't know. I'm not a great one. I've worked with some great ones. Look, I mean, genuinely, I think it's having a really good set of ears, and that's not just ears for what makes great content on radio or in the audio sphere. It's about listening to people. And I think that's probably what makes a great content director or a good content director great. I think if you dig down into it a bit more granularly, I think the great content directors are good at the whole gamut of things that you need to be. So talent management's a really critical part of being a content director now. You need to be good at that. You need to know how to manage talent well, get the best out of them. I think strategy is a really critical part of being a great content director. The best content directors I've worked with are the ones who are really good strategically and understand where they sit in the market, where the holes are in the market, and what the future looks like, not only for their brands, but for the business more broadly. So strategy is a really critical part of that. I think the great content directors are the ones who are highly creative, and that's an area I'm not particularly strong in. Never been the most creative content director. I've worked with some who are just fantastically creative, always coming up with fresh ideas, new ideas, great with writing and so on. So and then it comes back down to basic leadership. Content directors in most stations now are the key leaders in those businesses, and knowing how to get the best out of the team around you, hire the best, complementary people, and then get the best out of them is a really critical part of being a great content director. Bunch of good content directors, but the great ones are really good at those things, I think.
And speaking a bit more to, as one of the roles as a content director, managing talent, and when talent does hit a rough patch, how do you coach them through it?
A good question, but I don't know if there's particularly an easy answer to that, because it really depends on what it is they're facing at any given time, whether it's a rating slump, or whether it's some personal issues, interpersonal issues with the team. I guess if we sort of break that down into those key areas, I mean, certainly, shows and talent go through peaks and troughs, just like any sports person does. You can be in form, you can be out of form. And I guess that's what you need to decide, is whether or not, and collectively, that's not a decision a content director would make. That's a decision that, you collectively come to. But I think if the show might be slightly off, there may be, the content selection may not have been terribly strong. You might have just been, heading slightly outside of your lane, whatever it might be. But I think that's where a great content director can kind of guide the talent to understand that themselves. Most great talent I've worked with know when they're not quite on fire. When they're not really firing on all four cylinders, they know it. You don't need to tell them. But it's your job as a content director, I think, to bring them back into line, get them back into their lane. And often that comes back down to basics. What's the show designed to do? Are we meeting that brief? Is there any roadblocks in the way? That kind of stuff. If there's issues going on in their personal life, that's often very different. And I think the other key factor is whether or not the show or the talent is right for the brand at any given time, and that changes over a period of time as shows mature and as brands change. So that's a much bigger challenge, I think. I hope I've answered your question.
No, of course, that's perfect. And speaking a bit more to building new shows, what are some of the non-negotiables when creating and organizing new talent to come on air?
I'm not sure there's any non-negotiables. I'm a big fan of, from the outset, building a show Bible and doing that with the team. So the team builds that show Bible, and it's essentially a rules of engagement list. Who's going to bring what to the show each day. Clearly identifying the roles within the show, and that can be very confronting for some on-air talent when you start defining what you believe their role might be in the show. Yeah. And it's simple rules of engagement, I think, that everyone can sign off on. I think that's a non-negotiable when it comes to building a new show. Putting strangers together in a studio, mostly at breakfast time at an odd time of the morning, where it's a very unique and unusual situation where they're asked to share their deepest, most personal moments with each other and with an audience can be very confronting. So at least having a blueprint of how you're going to operate each day and what the show's, what its guiding lights are, I think, can make that process a little easier. Having said that, let's face it, if you look back at the litany of shows over the last 20 or 30 years that I've been in the business that you've seen come together and fail, they're like small businesses. So many of them fail, and that's not due to anyone's particular fault. I think it's just more a case of it's a difficult situation when you're putting people together. Much easier when you're in a situation like I was at WSFM in Sydney, where you've had a show that's been on the air for 15 years before I got there, and they're best of friends, and that show is obviously in a very mature state. That's not an issue for that show, but certainly new shows, very different situation when you're putting a couple of people together, and particularly in the regions, it gets even harder with fewer resources and less people around them. That's where I think those rules of engagement become even more important. That show Bible.
And speaking a bit more to that, would you say in metro and regional, even more important in regional, it's important for shows, breakfast duos and even drive duos to get along off air as well as on air?
It's ideal if they do, but I think it's unrealistic to expect that they all would. And certainly I've worked with shows in the past where the key players in the show have viscerally hated each other and still been able to produce an incredibly successful and popular program. So it's not absolutely necessary, but it's so much easier if they do. It doesn't mean that they need to live in each other's pockets, and I think that's an error that many of them make, where they think they have to be best friends and hanging out on the weekend and so on, and that's not the case. In fact, I think if you've got a two-hander show, which most of the regional shows are, you're in a better position where if you don't actually hang out on weekends, you live separate lives outside of the studio, and you bring those lives together on the air. Yeah. But certainly if you can get on, that's so much better than if you don't.
And speaking a bit more to that, even in regional, how important is authenticity in today's landscape, bringing in live and local content as well?
Oh, look, I think authenticity is everything in radio. It doesn't matter whether it's regional, metro, or anywhere in between. The thing is, I think in this day and age, where what we expect from great broadcasters and great shows is the ability to tell a story, to bring their life into the listeners' lives. You can spot bullshit a mile off, and then you add to that, so much of this content is shared through social media, where everyone's got to say. Back when I started on radio, you didn't know what people thought about what you said on the air, because it just went out on the transmitter and that was it. Maybe somebody might ring up and complain, but that was pretty rare, to be honest. And nowadays, you post something on social media and within seconds you've got people commenting about whatever the content is or whatever you've said. So I think authenticity is really where it starts and finishes, and most shows will say they're very authentic, and look, some are more authentic than others, I think. There also needs to be a level of showbiz about everything, and the great broadcasters are the ones who can find a genuine story from their life and blow it up with a little bit of mayo and make it just that little bit more entertaining.
And speaking a bit more to your time over at ARN, you helped take WSFM to #1 in Survey 7 of 2024. What was the key shift that made that difference?
I don't think there was a key shift. I think the reality is that we had a lot of things going in our favour all at the right time. So I've learned over the years that when it comes to ratings, you can gain some audience and the other mob need to lose some audience. And if you can get that happening at the right time, you can get a bit of luck. And Survey 7 2024 for WS really was a watershed moment in that we had our AM talk competitor in the market, 2GB, was just off a little bit in terms of its cume and share. Our FM competitors were off just a little in cume and share, and we just happened to get a decent bounce. We got a good bounce and went to #1. The reality is that station traditionally wasn't a #1 10+ station. Did very well in its target demo, and was a very consistent performer. but just a bunch of planets aligned for WS to go #1 in Survey 7. Jonesy and Amanda had been really strong all year. The music was in a really strong position. Tactically, we did some really strong tactics that year, and we had some strong marketing. So all of the key ingredients that put you in a good position were there. They collided at the same time as our competitors were just a little bit off their game, and that's what we got.
And as someone who worked very close with Jonesy and Amanda, how do you think they'll do this year in their new time slot?
Look, I think gold is going to be a powerhouse this year. In fact, moving forward, with Jonesy and Amanda moving to drive, there will be some of their P1 listeners who will be unhappy with that moving it to drive out of breakfast. But they're still in that ecosystem. So if you're a Jonesy and Amanda fan, you're going to be there on 101.7 in Sydney. If you're listening to one of the other gold stations around the network, you're going to be introduced to a new show. Obviously, both have strong profile. Amanda particularly has a strong profile nationally, which always helps. And I think the reality is the fact that they haven't gone from that radio station to a different radio station and to do breakfast means that their audience will get to like Christian. Christian is incredibly good at ingratiating himself in new markets. We've seen it in Melbourne. We saw it in the UK as well. I think he'll do exactly the same. In fact, he is doing the same in Sydney. And I think that the Christian show will ultimately be the most compatible show in Sydney for Jonesy and Amanda fans. So if you're a JNA fan, you might well queue around to some of the other stations to see what they've got on offer. Ultimately, I think you're going to come back to Christian. It will be the most, as I say, the most compatible show for that audience. Happy to be proven wrong, but I don't think I will be.
That's a great insight from someone who worked very close to them. Speaking a bit more to a role as now, of course, you're in your role national content director. What do you think separates award-winning radio from just good radio?
I think it's connection with the audience more than anything. It's the one difference, like the one unique selling point that radio has as opposed to every other media, whether it's digital media or traditional linear media, is that we can connect directly with the audience. We can matter to them when it means the most, and I think that makes the big difference between good radio and great radio. Whether that in regions, whether that's just parish pump stuff about what's happening in the main street of the town you're broadcasting to, whether it's the key emergency broadcasting times when you've got natural disasters in your town, that stuff matters. And it's why radio, I think, still has a future. If providing we can, continue to connect to the audience and deeply connect with the audience, I think we're in good shape.
And is there one piece of content in your time in radio? Is there one piece of content you've created or produced that you're most proud of?
Oh, gee, that's such a difficult question, mainly because I've been around for so many years. Look, I think it comes back down to the emergency broadcasting is one of the things that I've been the most proud of over my time in radio. And I think if I cast my mind way back to 2011, when I was programming a radio station in southeast Queensland called River 949, based in Ipswich, just west of Brisbane, and we had the really significant floods go through Brisbane, but also through Ipswich and our coverage area further to the west. And I think guiding that station through that period with a terrific bunch of incredibly dedicated people, 24 hours a day broadcasting under extremely difficult circumstances, to give people updates of what was going on at a time where they couldn't get that from those newfangled social media and various other places. When you've got no power and the only thing that you've got at your house is a transistor radio, and your only connection to the outside world is a radio signal on a battery powered transmitter, transistor radio rather, that's a pretty powerful connection, I think, with the listeners. And certainly during that time, that whole station was turned over to emergency broadcasting for quite a number of days, in fact, for more than a week. Then, of course, there was the clean-up and all the follow-up after that. So, if I look back at my time, that's probably those sorts of moments that I think are the things I'm most proud of.
And you've seen radio evolve massively. What do you think's changed the most since you started?
Look, I think a whole bunch of things. I think there's been a whole stack of things that have been great for the radio industry. Digitization of the industry has been, I think, broadly very good, and I think as an industry we've done a better job of bringing that new technology into the business. I think, on the other hand, the business model of radio has been really challenged over the past 10 or 15 years, particularly by multinationals like Google and Meta, who've just come in and absolutely pillaged what would have traditionally been all legacy media's revenue model. I think that's really challenging. I don't think radio has done a particularly good job of working its way around that new reality. I think in the regional markets, I think they've done much better than certainly in metros, and we've seen that with just with the collapse in revenue in the bigger metro markets over the past 10 or 15 years. I think it could be turned around, but that's a real challenge. So,
Yep.
Pros and cons. I think good things, bad things.
That's a good insight. How do you think artificial intelligence is affecting radio and audio today? Of course, with the massive rise in job cuts with AI, do you think that's having a big impact on radio?
I think it will have a big impact on radio. I think it already is. Certainly, we're seeing a lot of networks now taking on or using AI to produce content, whether that's producing news content. And scraping existing websites or other websites for news content. We've seen some networks use some synthetic voices for on air shifts and for news. I think it certainly has a place. I think we're kind of very clumsily working our way through it as an industry, and some are doing it better than others. It definitely has a place in the business. That's a reality, and I think in many respects, AI can improve the quality of what we do across the board. Whether or not that then results in headcount losses or job losses in some markets is another thing. But we've seen one major network employ AI to do some news writing, and it's blown up in their face with potential defamation cases because there was no human to cross-check stuff. So I think we need to tread carefully, but we definitely need to be open to what AI can bring to us as an industry.
And speaking more now to your time out of radio, after leaving ARN, you went from leading major radio brands to driving buses.
Yeah.
What was that period like for you, and what did it teach you?
It was great fun. It was fantastic fun. Look, to be honest, it was a bit of a childhood dream. My dad was a coach driver when I was younger, and I always thought that's what I would do, and just fell into radio at the age of 16. So, and I've had a terrific career. But look, I made a very conscious decision at the end of 2024 when my time with ARN ended, that I thought I wanted to do something completely different, even if it was just for a while. Having been in the biz for 30 plus years, it is a bit of a strange bubble. And everyone who gets out of that bubble looks back and says, it's a bit weird. That is a strange bubble to be in. And so getting out of it, doing something completely different, working with very different people who have a totally different mentality. I think the other thing that it brought me was a real understanding, and I think I always knew this, but it was very, very abundant, that radio is just not terribly important to most normal people. It just isn't. And, they get up in the morning, they might listen to their favorite radio station while they're getting ready for work or going to work or driving to work or whatever it may be. 9 times out of 10, they can't even name the radio station. And we spend so much time focused on branding and marketing. And to them, we are about as important as their toaster. They, that's what they think.
Yeah.
Our job, of course, in content and in radio is to make it more important to them. But we do need to understand the base with which we're coming from, which is we're just not that important. And I think if you can do that, makes you a better programmer. Certainly makes you, understand the way the audience behaves better. So yeah, had a terrific 12 months doing that, and as I say, was lured back into the business with a chance to make a real difference to Super Radio Network.
So would you say that stepping away from radio gave you a clearer and different perspective on the industry?
Oh, most definitely. And I think anyone who's worked in the biz as I had for pretty much nonstop for 30 plus years, you tell yourself that you know what normal people are like or what people outside of radio are like, but I'm not sure you do. So it's certainly given me a clearer perspective of life outside the media bubble. That's for sure.
Thank you so much, Mike, for joining Biz Audio. There were some great answers there, and I love the content we got today. And wishing you all the best in your new role as Super Radio Network's Group Content Director.
Thanks, Max. We should catch up again in 12 months' time, and you can do a report card on how I've gone.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Max.